All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are unpacking a really intense, highly debated segment recently broadcast by Sky News Australia. This segment tackles a super heavy and timely subject, the anatomy of an argument regarding political rhetoric and its potential link to actual, real-world political violence. Now, as always, our goal here isn't to pick a side. We are just going to neutrally break down the exact claims, the evidence, and the conclusions the broadcaster presents so you can really understand the core of their argument. Here is our structural roadmap for today. We'll cover civil debate under threat, media and political rhetoric, the escalation of political violence, the recent White House Correspondents attack, and finally, responsibility in political discourse. So, starting right off with Section 1, Civil Debate Under Threat. The broadcaster starts right here with a basic contrast, civil disagreement versus toxic politics. The idea is that in a healthy democracy, we're supposed to debate, try to convince each other, and frankly have wildly different views without crossing the line into actual harm. But the segment argues that this foundational rule, it's basically vanishing. They claim it's being rapidly replaced by a dangerous politics of hatred, one that's all about demonizing, attacking, and literally threatening political opponents. Moving on to Section 2, Media and Political Rhetoric. To back this up, the broadcast points to some pretty intense, direct quotes to show how much the rhetoric is escalating, like this one from a political figure. "If we were in high school, I'd take you behind the gym and beat the hell out of them." The source uses this to say, look, we aren't just debating policy anymore. We're shifting toward a space where physical threats are becoming normalized. And then it goes even further. The segment brings up this incredibly stark quote from a high-profile celebrity who actually stated, "Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House." Wow. Now, we are just letting these words speak for themselves here, exactly as the broadcaster presented them, to illustrate their argument. They're building a case that violent imagery is getting way too accepted in our public conversations. They also point to late-night TV to show that this isn't just past history, it's an ongoing, current environment. They pull this quote from comedian Jimmy Kimmel. "Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow." The segment really zeroes in on this specific joke, which was delivered just days before a major violent incident, by the way, as a prime example of what they consider a totally toxic, hostile media climate. So what's the big takeaway from these examples? Well, the broadcaster argues these aren't just random, one-off outbursts. They see it as a coordinated strategy. They list tactics like running conspiracy theories against Trump, triggering investigations, and constantly trying to have him charged or impeached. In their view, it's all about destroying an opponent rather than beating them at the ballot box with ideas. Now, to be fair, the host does explicitly admit that Trump's own rhetoric has been hateful and sometimes violent too. But the main thrust of this specific piece is focused squarely on the progressive left and the media demonizing Trump. All right, that brings us to Section 3, Escalation of Political Violence. To really hammer home this claim that violence is rising, the broadcaster walks us through a very specific timeline. It anchors 45 years ago when Ronald Reagan was shot. But then it rapidly accelerates. Look at this, the attempt on Donald Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania 2 years ago. Less than 2 years ago, the assassination of healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Last September, the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk's husband. And of course, culminating right now with the attack at the White House Correspondents Dinner. They use this timeline to argue unequivocally that political violence is surging in the U.S. And this segment puts a massive emphasis on this number, 3. According to the source, Donald Trump has now faced 3 separate assassination attempts. That includes the shocking incident in Butler, Pennsylvania, which came incredibly close to ending his life and tragically killed an innocent bystander. Plus, that later incident with a gunman lying in wait at a Florida golf course. The broadcaster frames this level of threat against a president as absolutely unprecedented. Which leads right into Section 4, the White House Correspondents attack. Let's neutrally lay out the facts of this latest attack, exactly as the source reported them. The accused gunman, Cole Allen, actually stormed the White House Correspondents event armed with guns and knives. He called himself a, quote, friendly federal assassin. According to the broadcaster, his goal was to target administration officials across the board, from the highest ranking down to the lowest. And they make it clear that his actions were deeply motivated by his antipathy towards Trump and his administration. This next quote offers a pretty dark window into the attacker's mindset. Before the incident, Cole Allen sent a manifesto to his family. He wrote, "I am a citizen of the United States of America. What my representatives do reflects on me." The broadcaster uses the specific line to draw a direct connection between the overarching political climate and the attacker's own internal justification for committing violence. Now, the segment does somberly note the human toll here. While the attempted attack was horrifying, thankfully no one was killed. But it wasn't without consequence. One police officer was injured during the chaos. For the broadcaster, this whole event is just undeniable proof that the incredibly toxic temperature of U.S. politics simply has not cooled down, not even a little. Finally, Section 5, Responsibility in Political Discourse. Okay, so what is their ultimate takeaway? The source makes a very clear distinction here. They state, no questions asked, that prime responsibility absolutely lies with the perpetrators. People like Cole Allen, who actually carry out these acts, are the ones to blame. However, and this is a big however, they argue there's also a massive shared responsibility. The broadcaster's final warning is that politicians, journalists, and commentators really need to own up to fostering this climate of hatred. It really does make you stop and wonder, doesn't it? Just how much of this toxic rhetoric are we passively soaking in every single day without even realizing it? Which leaves us with an incredibly provocative question to think about as we wrap up this explainer. Based on everything the broadcaster laid out, the quotes, the timeline, the escalating attacks, can a fractured political climate ever actually return to civil debate? Or is this violence just the new normal we all have to brace ourselves for? It's a really heavy question, but an absolutely crucial one if we want to understand the current state of our political discourse as presented in the source material. Thank you so much for joining me today to unpack this argument. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I will catch you in the next explainer.